Hey folks, welcome back to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. You know, as in these episodes, I attempt to untangle the web of deceit and false narratives that are spread in the news so that you have a clear vision and understanding as to what is really going on behind the scenes, not just what the media wants you to hear. So with that, let's get into some of the topics of today. Now, as I wrote in my book, America's Systemic Psychosis, I named it that because there was something systemically wrong, not in just one part of the country, but all around. It was system-wide, and the word psychosis seemed to be the best descriptor of the condition that we have. It was a nationwide detachment from reality in nearly every sector of our country. Psychosis is a medical term describing basically a mental condition where one is detached from reality. In fact, in a recent survey, 54% of white liberal women have underlying mental issues stemming from their inability to engage in syllogistic thinking and have this penchant to grasp for anything that might sound good for the moment, but not in a logical or deductive way. It was all based on emotion. They rarely bother with the facts. They seize upon an ideal or emotion and then build a mental defense wall against any invading truth. That's why you see so many of the protesters acting out so irrationally and physically violent in Minneapolis of late over the ICE agents, and these were basically all women.
I just want to ask, do you believe in illegal immigration? Do you think U.S. taxpayers should be funding housing for illegals and medical care?
Smart man. He is so intelligent. This man, he's got nothing to say. He's got nothing to say.
I got a lot to say.
He's a big man. What a big man. What a big man. Bye-bye, big man.
I'm very respectful. I'm very respectful. This is the mentality. This is the state of the United States right now. This is what's going on.
God did create us differently, man and woman, and it is an uncomfortable fact that since the election of John F. Kennedy, no other Democrat would have won the presidency but for the female vote. And as we all know and reflect back on those presidencies, they were abject failures with trend lines showing a decline in America. Well, I don't want to get too far astray from my main point that I wanted to make here, because enough books have been written about how few women can win a political chess game. And yes, politics is masterclass chess level. Politics is chess with profound consequences. So cycling back to my initial definition of psychosis being a detachment from reality, the best cure for that is, as I have been telling people of late, to spend a couple of hours just walking through a cemetery. Now, I know that sounds morose or morbid, but you know what? That's where we're all heading, and that puts you in touch with the reality. Now, forgive me for my digression here, but for instance, in Louisville here, it's one of the world's top 10 ranked most beautiful cemeteries, and it is known as, and by the name of Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville. It truly is a botanical wonder with lakes filled with white and black swans and geese, and caves that have been etched out of the walls of the cliffs surrounding the lake. But the real point here being, you see all sorts of tombstones and edifices there that were built to glorify the dead. You don't know the people that the monuments represent, nor have any care or concern of who they were or what they did. Oh, some of you might in Cave Hill, of some notables there, such as, and there's scores of them, but such as George Rogers Clark or Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken fame or Muhammad Ali and so many others. But no one really comes to see them because, after all, life is a very busy activity, and we haven't time to live in the past or obsess over those who have passed on. So if you want to snap a radical psycho like we are seeing in the Minneapolis radicals that are protesting against ICE, including the Democrat left politicians, walk them through the tombstones to remind them of their destiny and also remind them of how unimportant so many of the things that they engage in really aren't that important. So many of the psychos on the left spend so much of their time chasing an illusory lie, a false utopia. And too many of those who should be on my side spend their time doing nothing about the chaos the radicals are causing. Now, let's talk about Greenland for a minute. Let's do a little segue here to Greenland for a minute. The world is a great big chessboard. It's all about conquest, and that has not changed for life itself today and hasn't in all of mankind's history. Unfortunately, so many of us think that we're above the fray of it all, but we're not. And we pose a danger to everyone else by thinking that way. Well, let me make it really simple for you. Either we control Greenland or Russia and China will. Get that, don't forget it. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Greenland has no army. It has no means of defending itself. And it's an island that has only 56,000 people on it, smaller than many of the towns in America. So there you have it. Russia's most direct and quickest path for its missiles to hit America go right over Greenland. China wants to set up bases there too. Surely you don't think 56,000 people can defend itself against China or Russia, do you? Folks, this is the chessboard of the world. Like it or not, you don't have an option of not playing this game. You're in the middle of it. And the consequences of losing are unthinkable. Let's go back in history for just a moment. John F. Kennedy was faced with Russia placing nuclear missiles in Cuba 90 miles off of our shore. He drew the line in the sand and faced the Russians down and made them remove those missiles. But of course, back then, we had a more sane and moral population who could think clearly and strategically. So I'm not going to get into all the other justifications of what's right or issues regarding minerals and oils and so forth. A lot of people want you to think that we're so colonialistic and corrupt, but they've been taught that by corrupt teachers. It's quite simple. It's the Russian or the Chinese or us, and I know who I'm choosing. I know what their logical choice is, and it's futile and ridiculous to engage in any other kind of discussion about it. Either we win or the Russians or the Chinese do, and that is an unacceptable outcome. We have to be the ones to win. And if you don't want us to win, I'd rather you just leave and get out of here. Well, let's not leave this discussion with just Greenland. Let's talk about Venezuela. Again, I will remind you that we are playing a global chess game. Now, the radical left and Democrats would have you believe that America is doing bad things and is only out for oil and resources. Not so, folks. The United States is energy self-sufficient, thank you, Donald Trump, and it will take several years for Venezuela oil production to come back onto line. And once it does, guess what? It requires more refining because it's not exactly a clean crude oil. Here's the strategic importance. Russia and China have sponsored a lot of terrorist groups who have found Venezuela to be a playground to create a lot of mischief throughout South America and getting some of those countries to elect communists as leaders. Colombia, for instance, who floods our country with cocaine, has a communist leader right now. Venezuela has propped up communist Cuba. China is very interested in having intelligence posts there and are creating them just 90 miles off of our shores. Then Venezuela is in cahoots with the communist president of Colombia and Nicaragua and Lula of Brazil. And while the sanctimonious and self-righteous radical left and Democrats want to stop the United States' involvement, Russia and China are making inroads in developing outposts and ports and other means of communications and controls, all for the purpose of encircling the United States with countries that oppose us. The radical Democrat left is no friend of America, and in fact, they are the enemies of America, folks. Wake up. We have been slow to recognize it. Now, let's go to Minnesota for a minute. That state is deep red, as you'll see a photo here. It's very deep red, and as you can see from this 2024 image, except for 3 metropolitan areas, and as sad is the case, the metropolitan areas around this country are citadels of every sort of evil, sin, and corruption known to man. I spoke about this recently in another podcast and informed you that the blue states are the devil's playground. Statistics show they are in the range of 65% anti-God atheists. They call themselves progressive, but they are anything but. They are really regressive. From New England to Minnesota to the West Coast, they are what I have phrased so many times in the past as populations of God-hating, American-hating, hedonistic reprobates. They hate anything that has to do with God or any religion. And just as we saw in Minneapolis this Sunday, the anti-ICE protesters invaded a church during their church services, screaming and intimidating and threatening the parishioners. When you take a look at the demographic map of the United States, the red states have thriving churches, or God-believing, Bible-believing citizens who have a moral code of conduct that they don't make up for the moment or in the moment for their convenience, as does the left. The red state economies thrive, the crime is low, and for the most part there is peace among the people. On the other hand, the progressives, also known as the blue states, these folks are emissaries straight from hell. They live lives of futility because they know their destiny even though they will deny it to your face. Their moral code is made up day by day. They are Machiavellian to the core, whereby they justify anything and everything they do because they've convinced themselves as they try to convince you that they are morally more superior and more compassionate. Like their father, the devil, they are the aristocrats of lies, deceit, and manipulation. So to my Christian brethren, you need to start reading the good book, and you need to start getting back to a solid conservative Christian church that preaches the word. As our Lord admonished us, he told us to occupy until he returns, and we're doing anything but. We're turning it over to evil. So many churches and Christians today are doing anything but what they've been called to do. You have abandoned your post. So just as we witnessed the horror of church services being invaded by the radical left in Minneapolis on Sunday, this is just the beginning, folks. And I'm hoping basically there's going to be a mass prosecution for that. The questioning and conduct of Don Lemon with the minister was it was nauseating. He even tried to somewhat inoculate himself by saying that he was a Christian. But I can assure you this, he is no Christian as he crawls into bed with his husband every night. So now I ask you, just how strong is your faith? I know the apostles went to their death for theirs. I know Scripture tells us that God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but one of power. So where are you? Have you examined yourselves to determine whether or not you're living under the illusion of a false salvation? I remember in the movie Forrest Gump, one of the famous lines is, "Stupid is what stupid does." Well, let me paraphrase that a bit and apply it to Christians. A Christian is what a Christian does. Many can talk a good game, but do they really fit into the category of Matthew 7:21 through 23? You better go read that. It's one of the scariest verses in the Bible. I recommend that if you do anything else today, the one thing you should do is read that passage and do an in-depth soul search. The next section I want to talk about is accountability, and I call it the problem with accountability. And what would that be? Well, the problem is it never happens. So often the people who have caused so much of the misery in the world pass from this world before the full weight of the consequences of their actions are brought to bear upon them. So, as to serve as a deterrent from future bad actors, it has been known for years that Islam had a global agenda. It's called the Fourth Jihad, and it is a three-legged stool where one of the legs is to use the liberal and lax immigration laws of the West to flood the West with those Islamic devotees. Case in point, in England, where nearly every major city is ruled by an Islamic mayor, Isn't that a sad scenario? Shame on us. Shame on us. Shame on the Western society. Now we not only have a Muslim running New York City, but he is an avowed communist as well. And the statistics just recently, just as a little aside here, is showing a flood of people moving out of New York City. And guess what? It's going to go bankrupt. And I hope that our federal government isn't stupid enough to try to bail them out. But back to the point. Now that Islamic community has openly admitted that mass migration is one of their tools to achieve their goal for world domination, the liberals were gaslighting you, saying that it was all about compassion, attempting, as they usually do, to pull at your heartstrings. But as we have seen in Minnesota, and as is now being revealed in other states, part of the major funding of the radical Democrat left so as to fund their goals of permanent political domination in this country is through fraud. $9 billion, that's bottom line. $9 billion worth has just been caught up in fraud, and it all went to Somalis, went to the communists, went to the Democratic Party in Minnesota. Just as in Minnesota, that's just in Minnesota alone, folks, there is a very good chance that the governor, Tim Walz, may find himself in handcuffs, and I hope along with him there will be the mayor of Minneapolis as well. Now, I want to talk about this. In his new book, The Invisible Coup, How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon, best-selling author, Breitbart News senior contributor Peter Schweizer documents that jihadist leaders led by the Muslim Brotherhood and aligned Islamist movements operating both overseas and inside the United States, who have long been treated as mass migration, it's now weaponized through the exploitation of modern immigration systems, not as a humanitarian phenomenon, but as a deliberate strategy of conquest meant to penetrate, subvert, and ultimately remake the United States from within. Schweizer talks about the invisible coup, but I think it's not so invisible. It's been out there for everyone to see, and that is anyone who will simply open their eyes and see what they should be seeing. And I'm going to be treating more on this subject later in another podcast, but it is pretty alarming as to how the takeover is coming from within and not from without. Now, as you know, as many of you know, I have my own Christian foundation, and I dole out money, but I just don't do it willy-nilly. I have been very critical of a lot of Christians in their naivety, as well as Christian institutions who have been poor stewards of their money. I recently gave an anecdote of a local missionary to a Somali population here in Louisville, Kentucky. I always meet personally with these people and do an inquisition to find out whether they are actually being effective or not. In this particular case, I believe they thought I would just basically, out of the goodness of my heart, just write out a check and support whatever they wanted to do, support them in watering their garden of weeds. Well, when I inquired how long this particular gentleman had been a missionary to this community, the Somali community in Louisville, he indicated he had been doing it for 4 years. In that instance, I said, well, give me a report as to how you have evangelized and approached them with the gospel. And to my surprise, I really shouldn't have been surprised, but to my surprise, he had not. That was shocking. When I asked why, he said, well, they've developed a good friendship. To that I said, well, I guess you're just making them feel better on their way to hell. I refused to give any money until he had shown me that he actually had a game plan of storming the gates of hell as opposed to just watering the weeds. One of my biggest pet peeves, as I have stated many times, and question the running off to Africa and Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, while our wonderful country, which God blessed us with, is rotting away from the inside. There is a direct correlation between the radical leftist Democrats and their blue states and atheism. You've heard me likening this before to the requirements of an elder of a church. If an elder is not a man who is in control of his own family, then he is not qualified to be an overseer of anyone else. Likewise, as our country is becoming more and more atheist, we have the audacity to send missionaries out when our own house is crumbling. As stated before, the northeastern part of the country is 65% atheist, and there is 0% representation in Congress by any Republican. Likewise, the same is the situation on the West Coast. The church is dead there, and along with that is total Democrat dominance. Now here's a short one for you, and it's meant to train you in thinking and how to convert it into action. Recently, Bruce Springsteen dedicated his Promised Land to anti-ICE extremist Renee Good, the woman that got shot and killed because she tried to run over an ICE officer. And he tells the Gestapo ICE to get the F out of Minneapolis. I don't listen to any of his songs, and if I were listening to the radio and one of his songs came on, I'd turn it off. It's doing small things like this over time that develops important habits that add up to big things. And don't be shy about letting your family, friends, and neighbors know. Now, sure, they will laugh at you and say that you are extreme and that won't accomplish anything, but it accomplishes a lot, and it develops your character where you are not complicit with your actions aiding and abetting the enemy. You've heard me say it before, and I give examples over and over as to those influences that I refuse to support. I will not watch anything where, for example, Robert De Niro is acting. And that goes with any other actor or performer or influencer that spews out this toxic poison. You have no right to complain if you are financing the very thing you're complaining about. When people come to me and start complaining about why things are the way they are in the country, the first thing that I do is I ask them, what does your checkbook show? What does your calendar show? What do your activities show? Have you been involved in the community at all in order to stop the rot in this country? If they haven't done anything, I'm not going to let them waste my time with just complaining. So with that, let me give you a real quick example of what you get from Democrats. Democrats now control the legislature and governor's offices in Virginia. And here are just a few of the bills they are introducing. New 4.3 sales taxes on Uber Eats, Amazon, etc. deliveries. New sales taxes on admissions to a whole variety of businesses. Create 2 new higher tax brackets of 8 and 10% on certain people. A new 10% tax bracket for anyone making over $1 million. And to that, I say Florida welcomes you. 3.8% investment tax on top of the state income taxes. Raise the hotel tax, new personal property tax on landscaping equipment, ban gas-powered leaf blowers, guarantee illegal aliens free education, make it illegal to approach somebody at an abortion clinic, extend the time absentee ballots can be received after Election Day up to 3 days. That means if they're running just a few votes short, that gives them time to make up the shortage. That gives them 72 hours in which to make up the votes that they need. There's a bill to allow people to cast their votes electronically through the internet. All of this has been proven wrought with fraud. Add Virginia to the National Popular Vote Compact for presidential electors. Make it illegal to hand count ballots. More gun bans at the Supreme Court, which our Supreme Court has already declared unconstitutional. 11% sales tax all on firearms and ammunition. Prohibit outdoor shooting of firearms on land less than 5 acres. Lower the criminal penalties for robbery. Ban the arrest of illegal aliens in courthouses. Remove mandatory minimum sentences. Replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Not one thing in there addresses any of your current concerns. Remember affordability that they want you to concentrate on? I will say it again, the Democrat Party is the enemy of America and they should be treated accordingly. Think about this the next time you're with family, friends, or associations that support our enemies and ask yourself, should you really be equally yoked with people like that? So you see, you've got to get involved. Just that list alone is what the Democrats are doing instantly in Virginia now that they have the power. So to wrap things up again, don't forget other content in bluegrasschronicles.com. And until next time, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.